my best friend Christina, we always say we're sort of old people in young flesh at church. We gravitate toward the older people. And I think
Mhm.
it's so sad that so many of the younger generation, a lot of times they don't want anything to do with the older generation
Mhm.
because they don't see a common thread. My goodness, there is a wealth of stories and knowledge in these people.
Welcome to the Bookish Introverts Podcast. Join host Amazon bestselling author Brett Nelson and avid reader Melanie Dyer as they dive in to review books they've read, then chat with the amazing authors behind them. Quiet minds, big bookshelves. You don't want to miss it.
Hey everyone, it's Brett, and we are back today with episode 8 of our Baker Publishing Summer Author Event. Today's book, The Atlas of Untold Stories, will take readers on a literary journey through the heartland of America. Our guest today has written 3 novels and is a Christie Award-winning author. She creates contemporary, intergenerational stories told through the lens of hope and unshakable faith. She lives with her family in Kansas. So, Sara Brunsvold, I appreciate you taking the time to come on. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm looking forward to speaking with you.
This is the first book of yours that I've read. And when I saw the description of the book, I was immediately, because I'm a very bookish person, I love to read. And I was like, okay, what's not to love about a book that's about a literary road trip? So
that's right. Yeah.
So take us a little bit into that. Are you a bookish person too? What prompted the idea for a literary road trip?
Yes. So there's a couple of things that sort of came together to inspire this book. So there is also a mother-daughter element to this book.
There
And
it is.
so this book is about a mom and her 2 adult daughters who go on this bookish road trip. And part of that was inspired by my own relationship with my 2 teenage daughters and also my mom. So my mom is a former librarian, an avid reader, and you can guess where I got my love for books from.
Yes.
So that dynamic of our relationship definitely helped inspire this book. And then, of course, just the love for the Midwest. You know, that's where I am. I'm in Kansas City, in that metro area. So I am very familiar with the literary history of the middle part of the country. And I was an English major. That's what my degree is in. So, so I definitely studied a lot of the great American literature classics in a formal setting. So very aware of just how much literature history there is in America and especially in my beloved Midwest. So I kind of wanted to highlight that and just speak the bookish language a little bit in this novel. So all of those things kind of came together for this story.
And book lovers rejoice because it was fantastic. So I want to go back outside of the book for a little bit. I'm an author too, and I love talking to my fellow authors. And so I'm always interested to hear authors' journeys into how they got started, because writing a novel, especially for the first time, is a very daunting prospect. So what prompted you to do that? When did you write your first book?
So my journey has been decades long, if you will. So I first started dreaming of becoming a novelist in middle school, largely thanks to my English teacher at the time who encouraged me to write. And I should add, I also grew up in the Hannibal, Missouri area, which is famous for being Mark Twain's hometown. So just had some great influences from a young age. And so I went to college, got the English degree, had these grand dreams of becoming a New York Times bestseller by the time I was 22. That didn't happen. And, life took over. So that dream kind of was put on the back burner for many years, got married, started a family, started a career. And so in 2012, that dream just never really died. And so then in 2012, I got serious about it. I thought, if this is really where I think the Lord is guiding me to, this is the path I'm supposed to be on, then I need to actually put some discipline and time and investment to it.
Yeah.
And so I did. I attended my first writers conference in 2012. Got to meet other people who are weird like me, who see the world in story. And absolutely loved it. And so that really kicked off being serious about writing a novel. And so I started a manuscript. I actually wrote two manuscripts before I wrote the one that became my first novel. So, and that my first novel was The Extraordinary Deaths of Mrs. Kipp, which was published
Mrs. Kipp.
in, that's right. Love Mrs. Kipp. So that was published in 2022. So almost exactly 10 years after I got serious about writing and learned a lot. It is not a linear journey by any means. There's a lot of ups and downs and hard lessons learned. But, on this side of it, I wouldn't have it any other way. I would not be the author I am today had I not gone through that.
So much of the journey forms you into who you are as a writer. Yeah,
that's right.
And your story sounds a lot similar to mine. I published my first book in 2012, and I wrote my first 4 books before I ever published anything. So,
oh wow, yeah.
So, writing novels is a process that authors learn and improve in over time. So, if you could boil down your writing career to a few things, what are some things that you've learned through the process of writing and publishing your books?
Yeah, so there's a lot to learn. It is a big learning curve, both
You never stop learning, do you?
That's right. No, it's even today I am learning things. And it's true on the craft side that you're learning things, but it's also true on the business side, the industry side. It's all the above. So I would say on the craft side, one of the things that I have learned is deep point of view. And so I guess I hadn't really thought of that when I first started writing, but taking the reader even deeper into the mind of the character, so they actually feel like they are the character. They're not just in the room with the character, they're actually in the mind, the body of that character. And learning how to do that is a process. And
it is.
So that's been one of the biggest lessons I think I've learned on the craft side. Along with this is kind of funny, but one of the reviews that I got on BookBub, this reviewer downgraded me an entire star because I used too many ly adverbs. And I thought, at first I was just kind of laughed at that, but I tell you what, it worked. So now that is one thing I definitely pay attention to. And instead of relying on adverbs, is there a way I can describe the action or describe that verb a little better without relying on those adverbs? So it did help,
Part of me wonders if that person is some sort of English.
I think she was, yeah, because some of the other things she mentioned, I was like, you sound like an English teacher, but sometimes we need those. We need those disciplinarians in our lives. So yeah, I definitely think that on the craft side, those are two of the things that stand out to me the most. And I think just to mention one thing on the industry side is how much there is to learn post publication. So once you're on the other side of the publishing contract, there's a whole world that unfolds, and it's so critical to have people who understand the industry to help guide you. So I'm on the traditional publishing route, and one of the things that I'm thankful about my situation is that I have a really good literary agent who is an author herself, and so understands both sides, understands what the publisher is after, understands what the author needs. But to have an advocate like that on my side has been a godsend. Because there's a lot to navigate, what the terms of contract, and just making sure that you're doing things in a way that honors the contract, and just always keeping an eye toward the future too. Like things that you do today can impact your career tomorrow, and so having that voice to lean on and having that experience to lean on has been crucial. So find a really, really good literary agent. That's the takeaway there.
Yeah. Literary agents and Professional editors are worth
Definitely.
their weight in gold. I always say they're the
Yes.
unsung heroes of any author's life.
Absolutely. Yes,
Yeah.
they are gold.
And that actually is a good segue into my next question, because I saw on your website where you talk a little bit about your journey into getting a literary agent. Can you
Mhm.
talk to us a little bit about that? I know I do have a lot of authors that listen to the podcast. So kind of tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so a literary agent, of course, is if you're going the traditional route, that's your first major step in getting that publishing contract. So you basically have to sell yourself and sell your work to this agent first. And that is as hard as it sounds. It often is, it's not just about finding someone who will represent you. And ask me how I know. I learned this the hard way. It's not just about finding someone is willing to represent you. It's about finding that business partner that you
Hmm.
implicitly trust with your career, because that's what you're doing. Because as soon as they sell a book for you to a publisher, you are connected to that agent for the life of that book. And so you got to get along. You have to understand their work style, and your personalities, need to complement one another. So I made the step that I think a lot of new authors make, and that is, I was so starry-eyed about getting that publishing contract that I was just like,
Hmm.
okay, whatever the first door that opens, that's the one I'm going to walk through.
Yeah.
And I learned that that's not the wise way to go. You
Did you
really need
find
to
that
be
there's a
discerning
lot
about
of
it.
did you find that there's like a lot of sharks out there, so to speak? Or is that
Well,
not so much a thing in Christian fiction?
I wouldn't say that it's not a thing. I think that exists just across the board. I think for me, it was more of, I went with that first agent who offered me representation without taking the time to discern, is this
Yeah.
really a good business fit?
Because I would
And
imagine in the back of your mind, you're thinking, okay, if I don't pounce on this, what if I don't get another shot?
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yes. And of
Yeah.
course, when it became obvious to me that this was not a good fit, we had been in contract for the agent and I, not the publisher, but the agent
Hmm.
and I had been in contract for about a year. And I didn't know, I had never done this before. I didn't know, what's normal, what's not normal,
Uh, yeah.
what should I be accepting of, and what should I say, you know what, this isn't right. And it took I had a mentor at the time who was a published
Mhm.
author, kind of on the toward the end of her career, and she helped me navigate that season, and just, very wisely asked me some questions about, if this happens, what do you do? Um, and so, and then getting out of that contract, because you can, when you enter a contract with an agent, there's almost always a clause that say either party can rescind, with a 30-day, 60-day notice.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and so when I did decide to break contract, that was a very, very difficult decision, because it felt like taking this huge step backwards.
Yeah.
And then and I had heard that, if you have been represented before and you break contract with them, it may be harder to find another agent, because agents will look at that and be like, why did you break contract? Are you
You look
just
like you jump ship easily or something.
Exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
or you're just not, you have unrealistic expectations about how quickly, a manuscript will sell to a publisher. There's
Uh,
any number of reasons so I had to be prepared to explain myself in such a way that they knew that I was committed to making this a career, committed to this journey. But I just unfortunately learned the hard way that I needed to find the right partner for that journey.
Now, does your literary agent, do they have any say in like the actual content of the book, or are they more business side?
So at this point, it's more business side. The agent that I have is certainly willing to brainstorm ideas with me if I get stuck on a scene or I
Hmm.
get stuck on when it comes time to pitch new book concepts to our publisher for potential future contracts. She is more than willing to work with me on developing those concepts and making sure they're as strong as possible. But the actual book content, no. Once you're in contract with a publisher, it's really your dev editor who is working with you on that content.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about, and we're here to talk about your newest book, but tell us a little bit about Mrs. Kip for anyone that maybe hasn't read your books. Tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about Mrs. Kip and then a little bit about the divine proverb of Streusel.
Sure, I'd be glad to. So, The Extraordinary Deaths of Mrs. Kip is about an unexpected friendship that forms between an elderly hospice patient named Clara Kip and the young reporter who comes to interview her. And the young reporter's name is Aiden. And what Aiden discovers is a life story that has been unheralded for many decades. But more importantly, she finds a story that is going to shape her own in unexpected ways.
Mm.
So that book came out in 2022. Absolutely love it. I love writing intergenerational relationships. And so that's to me, that book is kind of the epitome of my brand, if you will, of intergenerational relationships.
Yeah.
And then my second book, The Divine Proverb of Streusel, that came out in January 2024. And it is about a young woman navigating a family crisis by cooking her way through her great grandmother's authentic German recipes. And so through that process, she's connecting back to her family roots and discovering her place in that continuum of family.
Uh,
That one was a lot of fun to write because it drew on my own heritage and my own family story as well. And it was set in Northeast Missouri, kind of in that Hannibal area where I grew up. So it was a lot of fun to mine my own family history to find inspiration, including some recipes. So the book
oh,
is
fun.
interspersed with some German recipes, and a couple of those came from my grandmother's collection.
Oh,
So
so if you're a foodie, that
that's
might be a
right.
good one to read. All
If you're
right.
a yeah.
I love stories about family.
Hmm.
They're just so interesting to me. So,
Hmm.
that being said, let's move into the reason we're here, the Atlas of Untold Stories. So basically, what that is, it's about a family, a mother and two daughters. There is a dad in there, but he's sort of outside of the story a little bit. It's mostly about the mothers and daughters. Chloe, and you may have to help me on some of the details because it's been several weeks since I've read it. Chloe is sort of a fly by the seat of your pants kind of girl.
Definitely.
She has just gotten a dream job in Prague. Is it Prague?
Prague. Yeah,
Prague.
that's right.
And she is terrified to tell her mother because mom is a high maintenance, very, I know what's best for your life and you need to follow
Yep.
it type of person. Lauren, on the other hand, the sister, she's a professional, very responsible type. So, in order to sort of, I think, warm her mother up to, hey, I'm fixing to go out of country for, is it 2 years? I think
Yes, it was 2 years.
2 years. Yeah, she decides she's going to take her on a literary road trip. Well, of course, mom doesn't like the idea. So, the only way she will go is if Lauren gets to go with them. Of course, unbeknownst to them, Lauren has lost her job at this company that is just her life. And so, just a whole series of events, and they wind up going on this. So, kind of take us into the story.
Yeah, so I mean, you did a great job setting it up. Yeah, so you've got these three very distinct personalities wedging themselves into this small yellow SUV for a 9-day road trip
That
around
does
the
not have
Heartland.
air conditioning in the
No
middle of
air
the United
conditioning.
States, which is, if you live in the middle of the United States, you understand how
Yes,
horrible that is.
yes, and it's summertime.
And it's
Also an
summertime.
important.
Yes.
So yeah, so right off the bat, the mom is not thrilled about
Yes.
being on this trip, but Yes, and Chloe is using this as sort of a way to open her mom up to adventure and the fact that you
Mm-hmm.
can push beyond your comfort zone and you're going to be just fine.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the three personalities just definitely great against one another. And of course, if anybody has ever been on a long family road trip like that, you know that even if you get along in normal circumstances, it's going to be a challenge
It can
to
be
get through.
challenging. Yes. And I
to
gotta
get
say, I am not a road trip person.
Oh,
I'm not a get in the car and just drive aimlessly. Like I want to jump in a plane and get there and
oh
so
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, see, we love our family. We will do road trips over flying. Maybe that's a middle of the country mentality where you just want to explore.
Yeah.
But so for this story, they start in Kansas City and they go through Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri, and into Oklahoma. So
Hmm.
visiting sites and places associated with American literature classics. And there's also this false assumption that Chloe has about her mom. She thinks that her mom is actually a literature lover because she would read a lot. But the truth is that her mom only read because she was trying to please her mother, who
Uh-huh.
was an avid reader. But Edie, the mother, Chloe's mom, really isn't that into books as her daughters think that she is. And
Yeah.
that just kind of is one of the first untold stories among these three women that gets revealed as they are journeying through these fictional stories. So these fictional stories are opening up and challenging their perspectives on different things about each other, about life, um, about morality, about what's
Hmm.
best for life. But it's also challenging their perspectives about each other and
Yeah.
what secrets they are keeping versus what secrets do they want to share. And so you kind of you see them as they are journeying through these literature sites. You kind of see them journeying through their own relationship development with each other. So
Yeah.
yeah, so that's a little bit about the story, and of course the characters definitely make a stop in Hannibal. I had to put my hometown in there at some point, but yeah, I think readers would definitely recognize some of these American literature classics that are
Oh, for
represented in the
sure.
book.
Yeah, and the story was so fun because the family dynamic between these three was just so real. It
Mm,
was not sugary sweet. It was very real. So
yeah.
I just absolutely loved reading that. So I don't, and this may be digging a little bit too deep, but like when it came and hearing a little bit, I'm assuming you probably have been to a lot of these places you that they went on
Most
their
of
road trip.
them, yes.
Okay, I want to talk to you about that in a little bit.
Okay.
Um, did I'm trying to figure out how to word this. Were the places that these women went, like for you as an author, sort of significant to the characters, or the maybe the struggles that they were going on in their lives? Was there any sort of correlation for you as an author as to why you took them there, or is that just totally
Mm.
digging too deep?
Wow, there probably was something subconscious going on there, but I don't know. I'm thinking through the inventory of the places they went. I think maybe the one that comes the closest is they make a stop in Kansas at the National Orphan Train
Hmm.
Museum and Complex. And that is the book that's associated with that one is Joan Lowry Nixon's The Orphan Train Adventures, which
Hmm.
they're children's books, they're middle grade books. And those were some of the first books that really affected me on a very deep emotional level. And I
Yeah.
distinctly remember my fifth grade teacher reading those books, and that was the first time where the characters stuck with me after the last page.
Hmm.
And I think that's how you know that a book has affected you deeply.
Oh yeah.
And um and so I think maybe I don't know if it was intentional, maybe it was a subconscious thing, but I've always been fascinated with that idea and sort of heart torn about that idea that some of these so-called orphans were not true orphans. They had living parents, but their parents could not afford to keep them. And so they were sent to the middle part of the country to start all over with strangers.
Yeah.
And I think that affected me as a child. Just thinking about, children kind of conflate things in different ways, but um, I started thinking, well, what if that happened to me? What if
Yes.
what if my
Yeah.
parents ever
If
got
that
to that
happened to them,
point?
could that happen to me? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, of course, viewing it as a mom now, I reread some of those books in as part of my research, and just, oh my goodness, it just hits in a completely different way. Now that I am a mother and I'm seeing that, and I think some of that emotion, that struggle, wrestling, if you will, that I had as both as a kid and as a mother reading those books, I think those do kind of bleed into the characters,
Hmm.
both in Edie, the mom, and then in Lauren, the oldest daughter. You kind of see maybe some of my experience coming out in how they are interpreting those stories.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
So, and with the preponderance of literary authors out there and stuff, how did you choose which ones to put? Were there any that you wanted to put in, but you just couldn't because of time constraints? Or how
Oh,
did you choose what
absolutely.
to put in? How do you roll out?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. There's so much to choose from in the Heartland. Originally I had them. I had toyed with the idea of taking them into Chicago, where Ernest Hemingway was, and then I think it was. Oh, now I forget where Kurt Vonnegut. It was either Ohio or Indiana. I can't remember. And then into Arkansas, South Arkansas,
That's where
where
I'm
my
from. Yeah.
oh, nice.
I'm
Okay,
from
so
Arkansas. Yeah.
do you know Stamps, Arkansas? Real
I've
little
heard
tiny
of it.
town.
I've never
Yeah.
been there. I've heard of it. Yeah.
Okay. So Maya Angelou,
Uh huh.
that's where she grew up, and
Yeah.
so, but there's just so much to choose from that I did have to whittle it down because they only had 9 days, right? And they had to stay on a particular circuit. So
Yeah.
it was difficult to narrow it down.
I
Yes.
would imagine when there's so many things that you want to write about, it's like, how do you decide? Because none of you didn't cut it because it wasn't important. You
Right.
can't get it all in there.
That's
So,
exactly right.
so can you give the listeners some of the places that they went?
Absolutely. So yeah, so starting here in Kansas City, so Ernest Hemingway actually has connections to Kansas City as well.
Hmm.
This is where he got his journalistic start. So there's a mural here that is associated with him. And then going into Kansas, we stop in Lawrence, Kansas, which is where Langston Hughes grew up. And word has it that he was inspired by the Kansas River to write his first and one of his most well-known poems. And then the Wizard of Oz
Uh huh.
Museum is here in Kansas. And of course, the Orphan Train complex is here in Kansas. And then Willa Cather in Nebraska, the Bridges of Madison County in Iowa, Iowa City, which is actually a UNESCO City of Literature. A lot of people don't know that, but it is very rich literature history there. The Field of Dreams is based on
Yes.
a short story. And then into Hannibal, St. Louis has a number of authors associated with them, including T.S. Eliot, sorry,
Uh,
T.S. Eliot, who is featured in The Character Stop There. And then Mansfield, Missouri for Laura Ingalls Wilder. That's where she wrote the Little House
yes.
books.
I love those Little House books. I grew up on
Yeah.
those. Yeah, that they really cultivated my
Hmm.
love. So when I got to that part of the book, I was like, oh yay.
Oh, and it's fascinating to go. Some of these places, they really appreciate the history that they have there, and they have preserved that history in meaningful ways.
Yeah.
So Mansfield is one of those.
Now, and I did Google after I read about it. I did Google, and their house looked nothing like it does on the TV show.
I know,
Like,
right?
was there a house that looked like that? That just like it's like a real pretty white house, and I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, it doesn't look like anything like a TV show.
No, yeah, yeah. Yeah. But it's still a fascinating house to visit. So I highly encourage
Yeah.
people if they're near Mansfield. And of course, Branson, that was one thing I learned. Branson is actually, the tourism in Branson actually started largely because of a novel, The Shepherd of the Hills.
Yes, I've been to
And
the
then,
Shepherd of the Hills.
yes,
Yes.
love that place. And then they actually make 2 stops in Oklahoma. One is for the Sequoia cabin. So Sequoia actually developed the alphabet and the written language of the Cherokee Nation. So
Mhm.
that was some fascinating history that I learned as well during research. And then their last stop is S.E. Hinton's The Outsiders in Tulsa. So those are some of the authors and works that you can expect.
Yeah, yeah. And they also made just a really short stop in Salisaw, which is about 30
Oh,
minutes from
yes.
my house.
Oh, no
And
kidding.
yes, and
Yeah.
I had no idea that Steinbeck, was it Steinbeck?
John
I had
Steinbeck. Yep.
Yes, I had no idea that Steinbeck. I didn't know he was affiliated with Salisaw, so I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
also found it interesting that the people of Salisaw don't really count him as one of their. Talk a little bit about that.
Yes, so it's kind of an interesting dynamic there. So Salisaw is actually it was the place where the Joad family was from in the novel The Grapes of Wrath, which
Mhm.
is one of course John Steinbeck's famous novels.
Yes.
But according to some of the people in Salisaw, Steinbeck never actually came to Oklahoma to research what was it really like and interview the people there. He did
Yeah.
interview the migrants that were in California. So, so the Joad family makes that trip to California. So he did get that research done. But some of the people in Salisaw felt a little slighted because they felt like maybe he wasn't representing Oklahoma in a fair light.
Yeah.
And so that kind of rubbed some of the older generations the wrong way.
Yeah.
So if you go to Salisaw, there's really not a marker or it's not surprising that you don't know that Steinbeck there's an
Yeah.
association with the Grapes of Wrath to Salisaw because they don't
They don't really
really
acknowledge
celebrate that.
him. Yeah.
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 And maybe that will change, as the younger generations come up. It may change, but for now that's the situation.
Well, and I want to talk about Willa Cather. One thing that I was reading about that kind of hit my mind, I really liked one part of her story in particular. I had never heard of her before this book. She was
Oh,
told early on not to go into writing because she wasn't any good.
that's
And
right.
and this is such a good lesson to not only authors, but really to anyone that wants to do anything creative or whatever, to not let people pigeonhole you or to say you're not good enough, because guess what happened after they told her that? She became a Pulitzer Prize. If she had let whoever told her
Yep.
that direct her path, she would never have accomplished what she accomplished. Like,
That is so true. Yes,
yeah,
I'm so glad you brought that up. And I would add the person who told her that was a highly influential editor.
yeah,
So, I mean, I'm sure that cut even deeper, to know that this is somebody that she looked up to
yes,
and really wanted to please. But yes, I think we can all be glad that she did not listen and
yes.
she was faithful to what she felt called to do.
What she called to do, and that's what it boils down to. Do if you feel that that's what you're called to do, just do it regardless of what the naysayers say. So
That's
yeah,
right.
yeah, I loved that part of her story. Well, and it also kind of made me think, can you imagine what that person who told her that? I always think back to what's the lady's name that wrote the Harry Potter books? J.K.
Oh, JK.
Rowling.
Mm-hmm.
She
Mm-hmm.
she was turned down by 39 publishing houses. Can you imagine all those
Yeah.
people kicking their rears now for
Oh
saying
my
no?
goodness.
Sometimes the people that are up at the top that are making those decisions, they don't always know what's best, because
Yeah.
sometimes lightning strikes despite what they think. So there was a good
Yeah.
lesson in her story.
Absolutely. And I think there's also as maybe a slightly different angle to that is I think it's also an important lesson to know, kind of tying back to what we were earlier talking about, is you have to find the right fit for you.
Hmm.
So sometimes I maybe consoled myself with when I was rejected by saying, that was not meant to be part of my journey. That was not meant to be the publisher that I was supposed to be with, or the editor that I was supposed to be with. So I do believe that there is something to that as well. Maybe J.K. Rowling was pitching to publishers that ultimately would not have been good for her. So,
Yes.
there is sort of that angle to it as well.
Since we're Christian fiction authors, we have a little bit different of a viewpoint as like secular authors do, but sometimes God's no is not always no. Sometimes it's just like no on this because I have something better for you.
Amen. Yes.
That you don't know. So no is not always no. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's no, this is not for you. You're trying to put a square peg into my round hole, So I want to pivot a little bit to what we started a little bit earlier about intergenerational themes that you like to write about. One thing I really liked about this book is that there was no romance in it. I am not a fan of romance, and trying to find a book without romance in Christian fiction is like trying to find a unicorn.
Yeah.
And I get it. There's a lot of people out there that love romance, so I get why there's so much of it. So kind of tell us why. Now, do Mrs. Kip and Streusel, or do they have any sort of romance themes to them?
No, Mrs. Kip, no, and Streusel, sort of. It's a very minor storyline, I would say, in the book.
Yeah. Okay. So tell us why you like to focus on intergenerational family dynamics instead of like the heavy romance.
Yeah. So, well, I think one is I'm not a heavy romance reader either. So, I think it's important to write what you enjoy reading because you write it more authentically that way. And as far as the intergenerational relationship and my interest in that, part of that stems from how and where I grew up. So I grew up on a family farm. It was a multi-generational family farm. My grandpa owned it. My dad and uncle managed it, and my brother and I and my cousin, we lived there on the farm, helped out where needed. And both sets of grandparents were within a short drive, and all of my extended family was pretty much there within an hour drive. And I didn't realize how special that was or how formative that was until I went to college and I met peers who did not grow up that way. And it wasn't until I started getting into my adult years that I realized just, how much those older generations had poured into me my entire life and the blessing of that. Yes. And then when I started feeling led to really live out that Titus 2 womanhood, older women teaching the younger women, when I felt led to start living that way, living out those verses and pouring into not just my daughters, but to other young women who just need someone to kind of show them the way in life and in their faith walk. I think that's when it really hit home to me how special those types of relationships are. And it is something that I think every human heart craves, but we just don't emphasize it a lot in our society, not the way that we used to. Where it used to be very common for multiple generations of a family to live together or to live on the same plot of land. And now we're a little more fragmented. And so it just becomes all the more special when you are able to build those bridges and you don't fall into those stereotypes of the boomers and the millennials going at each other, and that you're able to find these special, unexpected friendships that intentionally seek out what do we have in common and what can we learn from each other. So it's like a two-way thing. Yeah. So I think just having that heart and having that experience for generational friendships, that's what drives me.
Yeah, my best friend Christina, we always say we're sort of old people in young flesh, like at church. We gravitate toward the older people. And I think it's so sad that so many of the younger generation, they almost a lot of times they don't want anything to do with the older generation
Mm-hmm.
because they don't see like a common thread or,
Right.
my goodness, there is just a wealth of stories and just knowledge in these people. And I was just,
That's right.
and I really need to. I've got Mrs. Kip in my Kindle. I haven't read it yet, and I really need to get to that one because I just love the idea of a younger person and an older person bonding.
Yes,
So,
yes. So I think you'll really like that one. If
yeah,
if that's your jam, you're really gonna like that story.
it is my jam. And just family dynamics. A lot of my books are
Mm,
family dynamics that I write. I love to
nice.
delve into family dynamics. So, can you tell me of the stops that your characters made in what Atlas of Untold Stories? Do any of them stand out as your favorite?
Yeah. So my family and or my mom joined me on some of these adventures. So I
Did
didn't
they?
do the full 9-day journey. I kind of had to do
Yeah,
it parsed out a little bit. But
yeah.
one of my personal favorite trips that we did was actually to Mansfield, Branson. So they're actually not
Hmm.
that far apart from one another. And so we got to tour the Laura Ingalls Wilder farm and her house, got to see her desk where she wrote the books, and just how humble it all is. And to think that these humble beginnings created this massive influence over the world, really.
Yeah.
And then going into Branson, the Shepherd of the Hills, Harold Bell Wright. That might I always get it backwards. I think it's Harold Bell Wright. Um,
Yeah, I can't remember.
his his 1907 novel. It was a massive bestseller, and so that was some history that I didn't know, um, and just how influential that book was. Not just in the literature landscape, but also in that part of the country.
Hmm.
Um, People were so inspired by his book that was set here on this little farm in the Missouri Ozarks that they started flocking to that area. You know, that was before there were roads and railroads. So it was a
Yeah.
commitment to get
Yeah.
to this
That's amazing.
farm,
Yeah.
and just the history that they have preserved on that farm. It was fascinating. We did a guided tour, and it was absolutely fascinating. And a little tidbit, so the tour guide that the characters have in the book when they visit that historic farm,
Uh-huh.
loosely based off of our tour guide as well, because
Oh, really?
I was so impressed with him, and so I kind of had to give him a little nod.
Give a little homage to him.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Oh, I love that. I love that. That's probably the one. If I could choose one location that I could go and visit, that would probably be the one.
Mm,
Another one that kind of interested me a little, and it was just a very small portion of the book. I don't know why. The little bitty church that they went to, just out in the middle of nowhere. I did pull up a picture and look at it. Probably 5 or 6 people could fit in there at most.
right.
And it's just
Hmm.
out in the middle of nowhere. What's that about? Like, why is
Yes.
that
So
there?
yeah, it's kind of odd, isn't it? And it's not
Yeah.
to be clear, it's not a bookish related site. It was just kind of one of those fun stops that Chloe, the seat of her
Yeah.
pants,
Oh, look, let's
she's
go
like,
check
"Oh,
that
let's
out.
go do this." Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's called the Geographic Center of the contiguous US, so the lower 48, if you will.
Mhm.
And it's out in the middle of Kansas, in the middle of nowhere. And it's this little chapel. It's supposed to be an interfaith chapel, and
Mhm.
it's just supposed to be a place where people can go and reflect on what
Yeah.
ties us together as a nation. What are
Mhm.
the commonalities that we have, even with all of our differences and all of our conflicting worldviews? There is something that ties us together as a nation. So it's
Mhm.
just this quiet, serene little place that you can go and sit and reflect, and people do. I mean, they get visitors from all over the world.
Really?
Um, and it was featured, and this is said in Atlas as well. The characters bring this up, but it was actually featured in a Super Bowl commercial
Oh, yeah.
featuring Bruce Springsteen.
Bruce Springsteen. Yeah.
So that YouTube video is out there. But yeah, so that's the story, and it just seemed to be a great point in the story for Chloe to do some praying and reflecting, And so it's just kind of a sweet moment in the book.
Yeah, it was. I don't know why that just really stuck out to me. I was like, oh my goodness, there's this little bitty church just out in the middle of nowhere. And for some reason, I was just like, and of course, then when I pulled up the pictures and looked at it, it's so cozy and just looks like a great
Yes,
place to sit and contemplate life, except it doesn't
that's
have air conditioning.
there's no air conditioning. Yeah, there's definitely not. And it really does look like a garden shed. I mean, it's about that
Yeah,
size,
yeah,
so it's
yeah.
tiny.
Yeah. Can you imagine just being out or maybe being lost or something and then run across this little bitty, like for me as a Christian who loves church, that would almost be like a sight for sore eyes to just see that appear out of nowhere.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good
Yeah.
image. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how, I've never been there, but I don't know how accessible it is to people, but that was a fun point in the story.
Yeah, and I do think that they've kind of made it a thing now. So if you're in that area, there are directional signs that kind of tell you how to get
Oh,
there.
okay.
Um, so yeah, I guess it is more accessible now maybe than it used to be, just
Yeah.
because of its growing popularity.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this was just a fantastic book. Is there anything else you want to tell us about it before we start wrapping all this up?
I think this book is, if you like books about books and you like books about that mom-daughter dynamic and exploring what that looks like, I think this is going to be a great book for you. And I
Hmm.
hope that readers take away from this a couple of things. One is to go back to the classics, because I do think that those are classics for a reason. And we can learn a lot about the previous generations that came before us
Hmm.
by reading the classics. And then also, I hope it inspires readers to mine the stories of those who are closest to us, because we can't take that for granted, that just because we're close to somebody that we know everything that there is to know about them and about
Yeah.
what they're experiencing. So being intentional about getting to know those who are closest to us.
And I got to say, I haven't read a classic book since I got out of high school. So yeah, maybe I need to go back now that I'm older. I might have more of an appreciation for it now.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
think that would be true,
yeah.
honestly.
Do
Yeah,
you think so? Yeah.
I
Is
do. Yeah, because, as an English major, we read a lot, right? I mean, we
yeah.
read all of these things. And some of the books that I feature in Atlas, I had read in college, but it's just different. After you have had some life experience and you have walked through some things and you go back to those classics, you go back to, for me, it was Oh Pioneers by Willa Cather. It
Hmm.
was revisiting some of those things, even Shepherd of the Hills, or even a Langston Hughes poem. You go back to those things as an adult and you just view them so differently. They resonate
Hmm.
with you in a very different way. I think you can, at least for me, I could understand the writers, um, what they were trying to convey, the emotions that they were going through, the experiences that they were trying to convey, because I had
Hmm.
something to relate to in that. So
Yeah.
I do think that there's validity in going back to the classics, even the ones that you think you didn't like in high school. Maybe
Uh-huh.
give them another try because they might hit differently.
I bet they would. I need to do that. But I'm just now getting into, up until recently, I've not even been a fan of historical fiction. I was modern
Oh,
all the way, but I've read, I love Jane Kirkpatrick's new book. We had her on the podcast a couple of
oh,
weeks ago.
nice.
And Gabhart, we had her on, her book was fantastic. So I'm beginning to realize for some reason, I always thought I didn't like historical fiction.
Mhm.
So maybe now I could go back and read a few classics and be like, okay, not as bad as I thought. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So like
I do think that would be true. Yeah.
yeah. So what ratio of books do you like? Do you read mostly classics now? What's your ratio compared to contemporary to classics?
Yeah, I do intentionally try to read at least one or two classics a year. I know that that's a fairly low ratio, but there's just so many good books to read.
There are.
And so I tried to read. So one of the classics that I read this year that I had never read before was The Hiding Place by Corey Ten Boom.
Oh, I've read
I
that. Uh-huh.
I had never read it before, and
Fantastic book.
yes, yes. And I also listened to the sequel, Tramp for
Mm-hmm.
the Lord that follows her in her later life. So that was very eye-opening. One of the books that I reread fairly frequently is To Kill a Mockingbird. That's my all-time favorite book.
Is it?
Yes. So that's the book that I have read the most in my life, outside of the novel that I have read the most. And then Little Women is also one of my favorites that I want to go back to time and time again. But there are a lot of classics that I haven't gotten to, whether they were American or whether they're British or world literature. I love incorporating classics whenever possible.
There are so many to be read books, and I'll probably die before I get to even a fraction of them. But there's
Right.
just
That's a
so
blessing.
little time.
That's
Exactly, for
right.
sure. So we're going to start wrapping this up. What's a genre that you very rarely read?
I very rarely read, and I hope this doesn't turn people off, but the fantasy, YA fantasy,
Same.
I have read some, but I have a good friend who that's what she writes. So but I just don't spend a lot of time there.
Who are your favorite authors in Christian fiction?
Oh, absolutely. So one is Amy Lynn Green, who writes his World War II fiction. Absolutely. I think I have every one of her books on my shelf behind me. And Katie Powner is another one. She's a contemporary author. I love her writing. She has just a tenderness to her style. Another one that just revolutionized the way that I was looking at Christian fiction was Robin W. Pearson. She writes Southern fiction. A lot of family dynamics in that one too, Brett. So you might be interested in
What
hers.
is her name again?
Robin W. Pearson, and Pearson is Pearson.
Okay, I've never heard of her, so I'll check her out.
Yes. So a lot of Southern fiction there. Her first book really opened my eyes to what you could do in fiction. It just dealt with some themes and topics that I'm like, oh, I didn't know Christian fiction could talk about that. Okay,
right?
let's do this. All right. So those are some of the authors that are go-tos for me.
And I kind of like fiction, especially Christian fiction, that delves into things that you wouldn't normally see. I love boundary pushing. And when I say that, I don't mean sinful or inappropriate, but I just boundary pushing. I love it.
Yeah, I kind of label it as it's more real life. Like it is representative of what real life is. Even if you are a Christian, there is some really ugly parts about our experience on this earth. Yes. And I think if scripture can delve into some of those things, the really ugly things, then Christian fiction should do that as well. And so, so those are some of the authors that I think do that really well.
I always love fiction that's a little bit gritty. And again, when I say gritty, I don't mean dirty or inappropriate, but just books that touch on heavy topics. That's what I enjoy reading so much. Yeah.
Yes. Same.
What is something about you that most people might be surprised to know?
So my first book was actually a biography back in 2006. So many, many, many years ago, when I had kind of a burst of energy of chasing this publishing dream. I had the opportunity with a very small publishing house out of Chicago to write a biography on the New York Yankees legendary first baseman Lou Gehrig, who was my favorite baseball player of all time. And it was just such a unique, unexpected thing that just sort of came up. And so that is the first book I ever wrote, was a Lou Gehrig biography.
Is it ever going to see the light of day?
Oh, it's published. Yeah.
It's published.
It's out of print at this time, just because it's old. But yeah, that was my first book that I ever published.
Okay, so how many have you published?
Well, total. So the 3 novels, counting Atlas, and then this Garrick biography. So
In that
4,
one. 4. Okay.
4
All
total.
right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. If you could sit down and have lunch with one person, living or dead, who would it be?
Oh man, that's hard.
That's
You know
hard.
what? I think my temptation is to say my great grandmother Limbauer. I She was alive for about 8 years of my life. She passed away when I was about 8, I think.
Mm,
So I have vague memories of her, but the stories that I hear from family, she just
mm.
sounds like, one, a riot, and two, absolutely full of wisdom. And she went through some things in her life, and I would have loved to have gotten to know her more.
Oh, I love that. Last question. Can you give us just a little bit of a tidbit into what's coming next for the next book?
Absolutely. So, my next book is a women's contemporary book. I'm still working through some of the details on it, but it's basically about a woman finding her place in Christian community, especially after chronic illness has entered the picture. So that is set to release in fall of 2026.
All right. Love it. Can't wait to check that out. Tell the listeners where they can find you if they want to follow you on social media or if they just want to look you up to learn more about you. Where can they go?
Absolutely. So I am on Instagram and on Facebook. Love to interact with readers there. But one of the best places to find me is at sarabrunsvold.com, my website. There's a place that you can reach out to me, but I also have some free downloads that you may be interested in, especially if I have a free download called 45 Questions to Ask Someone Who Came Before You. So just if you're looking for
Oh,
help with conversation starters with somebody of a different generation, that resource is available for you.
that is fantastic. There is
Yeah.
no reason to not interact with the people before you. There's just such a wealth of everything hidden in those people.
I could talk for days about
Yeah.
that. I think you and I
Yeah.
have a very similar opinion about it.
I think so too. Yeah. All right, listeners, if you want to follow us, we're pretty much everywhere as Bookish Introverts Podcast. We're on Instagram, we're on TikTok, Facebook. You can follow, you can listen to the podcast on all major platforms: Spotify, Pandora, Audible, everywhere, like 25 different sites. So follow us there, listen to us at those places. And Sarah, I appreciate you so much taking the time out. It has been a pleasure talking to you.
It has definitely been a pleasure, Brett. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. And listeners, I would love to tell you who is coming up next, but I have no idea. It's all kind of blended together. So you'll just have to come back and see. So we will talk to you guys later. Thanks for tuning in. Bye bye.
Thanks for joining us on the Bookish Introverts Podcast, where together we explore the worlds within the pages. Until next time, stay bookish.